What if I told you this clean Bento-style layout can be built with only a few lines of CSS Grid? Let's build it together. Start with a main container div. I'll give it a class called board. This holds everything and keeps it centered. Inside, a heading. Level 2 heading, star emoji, and the text saved items. Simple and clean. Now the Bento grid itself. Another div with class Bento. This is where the grid layout happens. First item, running shoes. Each item gets the same class, so we can style them all at once. Second item, headphones. Same pattern. Third, smartwatch. Fourth, phone case. This one will become our tall item later. Fifth, laptop stand. Sixth, gaming chair. Seventh, backpack. Eighth and last, cap. 8 items total, perfect for a Bento grid. Close the Bento div, close the board div HTML done. Now let's link HTML to CSS. Let's style the body first. Display grid turns the body into a grid container. Place item center. This centers everything horizontally and vertically. Min height 100, viewport height full screen, always. Margin 0, no extra spacing. Background, deep black. Clean and modern. Font, system UI. Look sharp on any device. Body done. Now the board. Board with 900, responsive max. Heading space below, black text. Now the Bento grid container. Display grid activates grid. For equal columns. Gap between items. Bento ready.
So here I'm styling the .item class. First, I give it a very light gray background so the card looks clean and soft. Then I set the text color to a dark gray so it's easy to read. Next, I add a border radius of 1.5 rem to give the card those nice rounded corners. After that, I add some padding, 1.5 rem on the top and bottom, and 0.5 rem on the sides. Just to give the content some breathing space. I also center the text using text align. Center. Now to keep the card perfectly square, I use aspect ratio. 1 dot, then I turn the element into a flex container using display, flex, and with a line item center and justify content center, the content is perfectly centered both vertically and horizontally. Finally, I add a very light border and a subtle box shadow to give the card a bit of depth so it doesn't look completely flat.
Now instead of keeping every grid item the same size, I'm going to target specific ones using nth child. For the first item, I make it span 2 columns, and I set the aspect ratio to 2:1, which makes the card wider. The second item spans 2 rows instead, and with an aspect ratio of 1:2, it becomes taller vertically. The third item also spans 2 columns, helping break the uniform grid layout. And for the fourth item, I again make it span 2 columns with a 2:1 ratio, giving it another wide card. Look.so with just a few lines of CSS Grid, we can easily create a layout where some cards are wide, some are tall, and the grid instantly looks more dynamic.
Now let's make this layout responsive. I'm using a media query with a max width of 600 pixels, which means these styles will apply on smaller screens like phones. Inside the media query, I change the grid to 2 equal columns using grid template columns. Repeat 2, 1 FR. This makes the layout much easier to read on small devices. Next, I reset the grid items by setting grid column and grid row to auto, so they flow naturally inside the new layout. I also set the aspect ratio back to 1, which makes every item a perfect square again. Finally, I make the first item span 2 columns and give it an aspect ratio of 2:1, so it still stands out as a wider card even on smaller screens.
And there we go, a responsive CSS grid layout with wide and tall cards, all done with just a few lines of CSS. If you enjoyed this tutorial and want more simple web development tips, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.